I want to take you down a road. I want to remind you of a little bit of history. It is important to be bold. It is really important to be bold, but it is important that you are bold with facts and knowledge. So let me take you back to 1928. Now, this is 5 years before Hitler took Germany down the road of collective Marxist socialist madness. While the New York Times and politicians embraced fascism and communism as the new scientific way, in fact, wouldn't report on stories from Russia because it just was part of the process. It had to happen. Stalin began plotting what he called collectivism. That's bureaucratic bullcrap for I'm going to steal all the private property in the name of communism. It was part of his, quote, revolution from above strategy, where centralized Soviet government would control industry, especially agriculture. After all, the Communist Manifesto itself refers to free trade as the single unconscionable freedom. It's scientific. It was new, and it was a replacement for capitalism. After all, thought the Marxist, capitalism has failed. And what's more, it's at the root of all suffering and inequality. It's horrible. Well, within 4 years, collectivization resulted in the horrific deaths of tens of millions of Soviet farmers. They're usually the first to go. So Stalin decided to take a different approach. Well, I mean, maybe the right people weren't involved. Maybe I didn't go far enough. After all, I'd only tried it on farmers and peasants. You know what? What about a bunch of city dwellers? I bet I could drop a bunch of city dwellers into a barren land, give them some tools, give them some supplies, and wind up with a self-sufficient community within 2 years. Let's try that. This is exactly what Karl Marx, a white guy, exactly what Karl Marx imagined in Rule 9 of the Communist Manifesto, that to raise the proletariat to the position of the ruling class requires a combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, and the gradual abolition of all distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the populace over the country. So, according to Stalin's dictate, this would involve cleansing the urban centers of undesirables, mostly in Moscow and Leningrad. Sure, many were criminals, sure. But many more people were guilty of seemingly a harmless crime. Not having a passport. Did they get their vaccine? Not having a passport. An internal passport, you see. But the passports were hard to get. So as soon as the secret police were issued a prisoner quota, people in Moscow and Leningrad just started vanishing. We've got to gather up some of the local folk and put them in the middle of nowhere and see if they can build utopia. Oh, where's Dad? I don't know. Where's the 12-year-old girl that was snatched from a subway platform while her mother was buying bread? How about the 103-year-old man on his front porch just enjoying a breath of fresh air? Come here, old man. The young man who stepped out to smoke a cigarette while his wife was getting ready for their movie date. When she finally got to the porch, he was gone. The father of two that never came home. The pregnant woman. She had the passport in her hands, yet she was still snatched by the police for not having a passport. Well, they were all loaded into a train, as Marxists usually like to do to people. Loaded onto a train, en route to various labor Siberian camps. A lot of people. But each was given a fist-sized clump of bread. Yeah. Most people lost that fist-sized clump of bread on the train to all of the criminals that were there. The criminals were stockpiling it. Soon, the labor camps were overcrowded. Prisoners were dispersed randomly to various patches of barren land. Go see what you can make here in the snow. That included the 5,000 prisoners who were loaded into 4 lumber barges and shipped upriver to a place that was about to become known forever as Cannibal Island. It was a 500-mile trip through icy waters and torrential snow. When they got there and they were dumped off, there were no structures. There was no housing. There was no electricity. There was snow for as far as you could see. It was an icy wasteland that no human had ever lived in. Well, they were dumped off the ship, and as the ship was pulling away, they were like, have fun, everybody. Make sure you build a shelter really quick. Wait, we don't have a saw. We don't have any tools. Bye-bye. Can't hear you now. They didn't have any tools. They barely had energy. A third of them were too weak to even stand. So they slept in the snow that first night. That first night, 295 of them died. Being city dwellers, none of them had any idea how to farm, but it didn't matter because the ground was frozen solid. As for supplies, well, Stalin wasn't a monster. He gave them 20 tons of flour. Nothing to mix it with or nothing to cook it in. The criminals took charge of the flour, of course. They all ate flour until their teeth fell out and dysentery overtook them. Well, the camp was overseen by 2 commanders and 50 guards. We have to watch these guys. That old man, that 103-year-old man, is he still alive? And that little girl that was snatched from the subway, boy, we got to guard her. The guards, by the way, weren't better off, really. They didn't have shoes. They didn't have uniforms. Some of the prisoners fashioned boats from branches and tried to escape, but none of them could navigate the icy waters. They were hurled back to shore, dead or flailing. And the guards decided they were going to hunt them like game. Within a week, the prisoners began resorting to cannibalism. They would first eat the dead, and then, because most of them were criminals anyway, the roving gangs dragged any dying prisoners to fires and roasted them like chickens. Prepare yourself. One woman barely survived after her calves were cut off and eaten. Within 3 months, the majority of the prisoners had died or just vanished. This is only one of the little Marxist experiments in new science. Who knows how many lives were taken like this? The one thing we do know for sure is that just like the fascists in Germany, who were also socialist Marxists, National Socialists, that's what the Nazi Party stood for? Yeah. Just like with the National Socialists under Hitler, or the Marxist Communist Socialists in the Soviet Union, it has one theme that is rooted in the idea of Karl Marx. Life means nothing. Life means nothing. Or as Marx says it, the duty of each citizen is to sacrifice themselves for the good of the movement. So those people who were just disappeared, those people who just were shipped off on a log barge, well, they were experiments. And it was good to find out that wouldn't work. Freedom always hovers between what could happen and what needs to happen. We like to think that our freedom is irremovable from us, but it's not. You're on the edge of losing everything that really matters. I don't mean your house. I don't mean your money. I mean your freedom. Your right to think differently. Your right to believe that all white people, all black people, all Asian people, all any people are not born bad. You're about to lose the right to believe in meritocracy. It's always possible and becoming much more probable every day that unless we stand with facts and with an unshakable voice and an unbendable spine, we will be stripped of our freedom. It will happen. It always does when Marxists are in control. And make no mistake, Joe Biden is not in control. The Obama administration is in control. Joe Biden is going to be remembered as the guy who was too feeble to do anything about it. But I'm sorry, I don't believe that Joe Biden would actually put into his budget, instead of mothers, birthing people. That just doesn't seem like Joe Biden to me. But it seems like all the people that were around Obama and are all around in the White House today. Freedom is always lost when Marxists take control. You notice nobody is calling themselves a democratic socialist anymore? How come nobody's talking about the great things in Sweden? No, they're not democratic socialists. They're all Marxist now. And they will destroy, as Marxists always do. Marxism denies freedom. It denies independence. It denies the individual. Despite what the Marxists say, it even denies solidarity. Now, if anybody asks you for proof, ask them how much they know about Cannibal Island.